Welcome back to Balancing Acts, your guide to grow, profit, and scale. I'm your host, Linda Hamilton, a CPA, certified exit planning advisor, and systemologist. And our guest today is Felipe Wityk Sanchez, the CEO and founder of Wealthspring Financial Services. Felipe, we've had a great talk today. We've covered everything from tax deductions to understanding your financial statements and being proactive. Now I want to talk a little bit about resolving tax issues. Um, I've been practicing more than 30 years, and oftentimes taxpayers get in trouble. They get a tax notice. It might be an income tax notice from the IRS. It might be a notice about sales taxes or possibly about payroll taxes, but they get very stressed out by these. And so the two things I want to talk about is one is resolving those problems so they don't get worse with penalties and interest. And the other is how to avoid them in the first place. So let's start with how Wellspring provides representation and what that
Sure.
means.
So, you know, people, clients are overwhelmed sometimes with the amount of paperwork that they have to deal with. And again, I've seen small businesses get into trouble by not responding to a notice.
Yeah.
They tell them, the tax agency, whether it's at the state for sales tax or the federal government for some other tax or payroll tax or whatever it is, right? They're saying, by the way, you haven't been compliant, and this is outstanding, and we haven't received your 941 or your in this case of New York, the state, the NYS 45, which for filing payroll taxes and stuff like that. And so they neglect answering this. And what happens is that these notices start accumulate because the deadline has passed or is fast approaching. Um, they start accumulating penalties and interest if you exceed the timeline of responding to them. And so a year goes by, and all of a sudden, I have a client. Like right now, we have a bunch of clients that we're representing to the state and the federal government, mostly to the state, saying, we your your revenue has increased, and we want you to file on a monthly basis for sales tax. And they never notified us that we were filing quarterly, and so because we don't get the notices, the accounting firm, anyways, we have to now um, we have to now change the way we're doing business and file on a monthly basis. But we have to fight on behalf of the client, say, yes, we'll pay whatever we owe, but we don't want to pay the penalties. How can we? And so then we have to write a letter explaining how not to pay the penalty, because interest is the law, and so we're going to pay the interest. But we're in the middle process of that, and hopefully at the end of the day, on a $12,000 fine, the business will have to pay four or five, I mean, $3,000 or $4,000 just on interest, and not the late filing fees, for example. So, and then the same thing happens with filing federal payroll or tax. We have another client that he gave us the paperwork, but the paperwork didn't have the correct EIN number. So we've been filing his taxes with the erroneous EIN number, and then the government is coming back to us, the IRS, the federal government is coming back to us saying, you haven't filed your tax, you're delinquent on filing tax returns, you're delinquent on paying payroll taxes, all of this. And so we've had to figure out, okay, what is the correct EIN number? We have paid it. There's a lot of back and forth. And initially they want you to pay up front, but no, we're saying we're not going to pay up front. It's just you guys have to do now the correct merging of what we've paid for payroll taxes, and file the correct 941s, et cetera, et cetera. the other problems exist when you know businesses get behind. They say, I don't have money for the sales tax. Well, then you should get a service like Davo that takes money out from your business on a daily basis and pays those sales taxes. Because because the state agency or the government agency wants their money, and it's their money. And if you're not paying them on a, whether it's a monthly, quarterly, or yearly basis, their due, their share that you've collected on their behalf, they're going to penalize you considerably.
Exactly.
Same thing goes for for people that do their own payroll. For some reason, they're not submitting the tax associated with what they've deducted from their employees.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
it's crazy. It's crazy to think that you're going to get away with, and I know we're coming up to an end of time, but it's crazy to think that the government at some point is not going to catch up.
And so I want to summarize. I want to step back for a moment. We covered a lot there. And so for our audience, the first thing you have to do is, if you get a notice in the mail, you open it right away. You don't stick it in the drawer, and you immediately call your accountant. If you don't have an accountant, you get a reference and you call a different accountant. If your accountant you think is partly responsible, maybe you don't want to call them. Again, still get help from someone. The worst thing you can do is put it in the drawer and not deal with it, because it could cost you 5 times more. And the other thing, Felipe, you were just talking about is we're talking a little bit about sales tax and payroll tax. What I want the audience to think about is this: sales tax is not our expense, right? You sell something, you put sales tax on it. You're kind of like an agent for the government. You're collecting this money. Oh, it's $50 in sales tax, and you have to give it to the government. And what you just described is so common across the United States. The 30 years I've been doing business, I've seen it where customers come to me, they were doing their own thing, they had a different accountant, and they didn't pay, and suddenly they owe thousands and thousands of dollars. It's not your money. That's what's called a trust fund tax. And if you don't collect it, or you collect it, which is even worse, and don't pay it, the government can come after you forever on that, because they can come after you personally. You're not protected by your corporation or anything. So really want to get that financial clarity on understanding sales tax, understanding your responsibilities, and understanding payroll taxes. So now, with the thought of payroll taxes, let's talk about independent contractors a little bit. There are no payroll taxes. Go ahead. If you have something else, go right ahead.
I want to say that the governments make mistakes.
Yes, they do. You're right.
And at the federal level, they make mistakes. We found that out. And you don't find out until you start unpacking, what are they saying? What do we have? And then you come to some agreement when you have to show up in front of them to represent a client and say, by the way, you're wrong. This is why you're wrong. And let's negotiate here.
Yeah.
Anyways, subcontractors.
But you're right on that. You might have to prove it. And you do need an accountant to help you with that almost all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And at the end of the day, the agencies don't want to see you go out of business. They don't want small businesses to go out of business. But they want their money. And so they're able to give you terms.
But they are collection agents, but by nature, collection agents want to collect money. So you will have a fight on your hands. Let's briefly talk about independent contractors. While you don't withhold anything, there's a lot of debate around the subject of, they're great for helping you grow, right? You can grow, and that's a way to keep your business going without, and you can scale up or down. But that also brings some education you need around what's the right classification.
Right. So I see a lot of small businesses push the envelope with subcontractors. If you're going to do that, make sure you have a signed W-9 form, which says that their name, their social or ITIN number, their address. Make sure that you have an agreement with them. That it's called contract labor agreement. I mean, there's and that they've signed it, because a lot of people are pushing the envelopes for whether it's an employee or a contractor. An employee means that you're giving them the work, you're telling them when to do the work, how to do the work, where to do the work. A contractor comes in and just, you don't have all those terms with the contractor. But small businesses need contractors because they're not paying them as much. They're not paying their payroll taxes, the employer taxes, etc. So I see a lot of that, but small business owners need to protect themselves with the documentation that says I've done my due diligence, and then those are contractors. If you're paying them as contractors, my employers want to help them, and my employers want them to be able to deduct some of the expenses associated with being a contractor, such as cell phone and the transportation, et cetera. And so that they are doing themselves, they're filing a Schedule C for themselves because they're not paying self-employment tax on that money, on $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, and they don't know anything.
Contractors, essentially, they're self-employed. They're
That's
technically business owners, right? Just like
right.
you are paying them and you're a business owner and they're also a business owner. So
Right.
what is really important is educating yourself about the right classification, because if let's say you paid someone $30,000 a year and they're misclassified, that could cost you at least $6,000 in penalties, back taxes, etc. And if you have 10 of those contractors, you could be talking about a lot of money. So educate yourself. Felipe, how can people learn more about you? You shared so much great insights and expertise with our audience, and I know we're all grateful for that.
Yeah. Well, one thing is you could sign up for our monthly newsletter. We put out a newsletter every month at our website. You could just submit your name and ask for the newsletter. You could reach me at Wealthspring Financial Services, all one word, .com. And my phone number, my office number is 917-862-3085. On my website, you could ask for a 10-minute free consultation. We give those consultations, and we are bilingual. I wanted to say that we're all bilingual at my firm.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was great having you. I hope you learned a lot from today's episode to help you get away from financial confusion and towards financial clarity, both in your taxes and in your books. And come back next week for another episode.
Thank you, Linda.